No worries. Hi, everyone. We are still in the Norman Palace here, and now in the Palace Chapel, or the Capella Palatina, the Palatine Chapel. This is all the same place. Um, Roger II commissioned a new chapel to be built on an older chapel that is now the crypt. That older chapel is from 1080, from the very early days of Norman occupation of Sicily. And this new chapel has is dedicated to St. Peter and has a hybrid kind of Latin and Byzantine layout. What's Byzantine about it is that there are three apses, and then what's Latin about it are the side aisles here, these kind of that we actually see on the picture on the right here, these two side aisles that are cordoned off here with the pointed arched colonnade. That's typically what we've seen in Western Europe. The mosaics are substantial and cover most surface areas in the chapel, and they are very Byzantine in form and in content. If we look at Byzantine art, we often see domes or apses with the image of Christ as Pantocrator. We're going to see another Christ as Pantocrator later in Cefalù. This is this kind of formal half-length portrait of Christ that we see here at the top of this dome, holding a book, giving the sign of the blessing with a cruciform halo. This is Christ as the all-knowing, almighty, divine being that he is. The other mosaics, and you can see bits of them here, depict saints and angels. We also see some narrative scenes here from the lives of Saints Peter and Paul and some Old Testament scenes in the central space. You can see just a tiny bit of this Muqarnas ceiling, and I want to focus there because this is such a fascinating and unusual addition. Think about that Muqarnas ceiling that we saw in the Great Mosque of Cordoba, in a mosque. Here we see a Muqarnas ceiling made entirely of wood in the Capella Palatina. There are inscriptions in multiple languages, and what is so fascinating to me is that there are the inscriptions also include different dates based on the different calendar systems. So the Latin date is 1142. The Greek date that's inscribed here is 6650, and the Arabic date, the Muslim date, is 536. These hundreds of little facets and pockets of the Muqarnas ceiling were painted, and notably with many purely ornamental, vegetal, zoomorphic designs, which of course speak to that Islamic tradition as well. Most Muqarnas are in other places. Think about, again, the Great Mosque of Cordoba are made out of stone. Sometimes we see depictions in stucco, but here they are carved in wood. And it also includes this really fascinating depiction of King Roger II in an Arabic style, where he's seen seated. He has this kind of stylized, flattened approach to the human figure, and instead that focus on aniconic ornament and gold. You guys, Sicily is so fantastic, and I was so fortunate to be there in just this past December and January, and I consider myself all the more fortunate now to know about all of the hardships that Italy has endured, bearing the brunt, one of the epicenters here of the coronavirus outbreak. And you can see me looking just totally calm, cool, collected here as I was visiting Monreale Cathedral. And my head was exploding, and I was crying from art historian overjoy. And here we see just so many fascinating elements of Norman Sicilian design. So this is the Cathedral of Monreale, which is a small site, a town above Palermo. It really is on the top of a mountain, Monreale, the Royal Mountain. And this cathedral was it was erected by King William II, who ruled from 1167 to 1189 in a royal park on the site of an earlier Greek church. And most of the work here was finished by the death of the king in 1189. The church is dedicated to the Assumption of the Virgin, and mosaics cover most of the walls in the sanctuary and the nave, a surface that is roughly, get this, 7,600 square meters. To get that in square feet, you would multiply that by 9, more or less. So the Monreale Cathedral presents the most extensive mosaic decor in Italy. It surpasses even Venice's San Marco Cathedral. All right, let's take a look first, though, at the exterior. The exterior, you can see, also includes mosaic elements. So we see all of these stone inlays here, the roundels as well, all aniconic, all geometric design. The use here of these overlapping, slightly pointed Norman arches to create this polychromatic, visual interest on the facade. When we turn to the interior here, we're looking at the main apse, and we see again that half figure of Christ Pantocrator. The apse also holds large enthroned images of the apostles Peter and Paul, and the walls present scenes from their lives that we can't really see here very well. There's also an extensive cycle of mosaics of the life of Christ, and we also see in the main nave, we have in these photos here from the left and the center, we see 42 scenes from Genesis that are depicted in these two registers. So for example, we see in this scene, kind of easy to pick out here, we see an early scene from the very first chapters of Genesis, God creating the universe. Below that, we see the story of Noah's Ark. And I bring you this photograph here from the cloisters adjoined to the cathedral here to show you again some of these details of that mosaic inlay in the architectural features. Think about Durham Cathedral. Think about the geometric patterns that were carved onto the main nave piers of that cathedral. Here we see a similar Norman approach, using geometric ornament and also taking this more Eastern, more Byzantine and Arab Muslim tradition of using mosaic as architectural embellishment. All right, Cefalù. Cefalù was founded at the very early part of Roger II's reign, so the 1130s, as the Royal Burial Church. And what we're looking at here is just some of the key architectural features that we have seen in Normandy and in Norman England as well. This kind of Norman Romanesque with a mix of wooden roof and vaulted, an east end apse, this huge towering westwork that almost makes you think, is this a church? Is this a fortress? It has that kind of militaristic, imposing quality on the exterior. And again, also two pointed arches. But we really want to focus here again in the eastern apse. Here's a closer detail to see Christ, the Christ Pantocrator mosaic. And here below Christ Pantocrator, we see Virgin Orant figures, these figures with raised hands. archangels, different, here we have the 12 apostles lined up in the registers below. And I love this detail so much. Think about all these other Pantocrator images of Christ. It's very typical to see him giving the sign of the blessing with his right hand and then holding an open book in the other hand. And here in the open book, in the detail, you might be able to make this out a little bit. There's Greek on one page, Latin on the other page. Again, reaching out to this multicultural, multilingual society. And in both Greek and Latin, it says, "I am the light of the world." Okay, let's look at a textile here to wrap up this unit. This garment was made in Palermo. Remember, we have these Norman textile workshops right in the Norman Palace itself. And it was most likely made by Arab craftsmen, or at least artists who were familiar with Arab textile traditions. It is made of red silk and then embroidered with gold and silk thread. And we also see the application of glass and jewels. So for example, here, other smaller jewels that are affixed to the surface of the textile itself. Things like garnets, glass, pearls, rubies, sapphires, even some cloisonné enamel pieces. In the center, we have a palm tree here, and then on each side, we see a camel being attacked by this fierce lion. Now, the lion was an emblem of the Norman kings of Sicily, and the camel typically was used to represent the Arab world. So I think this kind of tempers what I said earlier, that the Normans are these, kind of multicultural, assimilating, travelers, because here there's clearly a kind of power dynamic being expressed. However, we also see this incorporation of text. This is Kufic Arab script, and it reads in translation. This belongs to the articles worked in the royal workshop, which has flourished with fortune and honor, with industry and perfection, with might and merit, with his sanction and his prosperity, with magnanimity and majesty, with renown and beauty, and the felicitous days and nights without cease or change, with honor and solitude, with protection and defense, with success and certainty, with triumph and industry, in the capital city of Sicily in the year 528. And of course, remember, that is the Islamic Hegira date that corresponds to the year 1133-1134. This mantle is sometimes called the coronation mantle of Roger II, but it was made a few years after his life. And again, although we see this scene, I think this is a good work to end on here for our unit on the Normans, because it does show us the complexities of the kind of identity formation of the Normans and the complexities of this multicultural society that they established and nurtured in a place like Sicily.